There have been a number of times in the history of my life that I have had to recalibrate this notion of sort of like nothing shocks me anymore. This is another one of those times. How are you tonight, John?
I'm entertained, certainly entertained.
Yeah. I mean, I'm talking, of course, about this, the Disinformation Governance Bureau. It's a bizarre Orwellian, North Korean style, crazy thing. They just have come up with this. It's not like they had a vote or a referendum. I don't even know if anybody likes this musical theater kind of like reject from the extras holding pen on an episode of Glee. Nina Jankowicz. She's a Russia expert, apparently, John. She's a disinfo expert, but I think not in the way that she thinks she is.
All right, well, we'll have to take a closer look at Nina Jankowicz tonight in tonight's show. That's going to be exciting. I love the show tunes part of it. I mean, that you don't always get that with government oversight. You don't always get show tunes with your government oversight. So I'm looking forward to that aspect of the show because you know how I love show tunes.
Well, I was going to say, I can't hide this. I hate that. I super hate that. Like, you always have these like theater people, musical theater kind of people in high school. That show Glee is all about it. And at NYU, being in the film school, there were a lot of, I think musical theater was a major at NYU. And I had some friends who were in it, but when they would like break out into song in the middle of the dorm, I just sort of rolled my eyes. But when it's given to us by a tyrannical, unelected, frankly, this woman is a dope. I say it a lot, I know, but I almost need to recalibrate the dope scale for how dopey this lady is. Oh, and you know how old she is, John?
How old?
I'll give you two guesses, and they both start with 3.
Yeah, so she's in her 30s.
33.
Oh, I should have known.
But we have a very special show tonight, John, because not only are we going to be talking about this, disinformation ministry or whatever the hell it is, we're going to be doing our regular sponsor exclusive segment at 7:30. People can watch that on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and Subscribestar and Patreon/crowdsourcethetruth. But tonight, we have a special double feature just for our sponsors, because they are the people who make this show possible. And, as this oppression of the First Amendment and this totally oppressive environment kind of permeates the internet, it's become increasingly important that people become sponsors on Subscribestar and Patreon/IamJohnCullen and Crowdsource the Truth, because they're trying to stamp us out. It's been happening to you and I for the past 5 years, and we're going to talk about that tonight. Anthony Fauci has basically announced that the pandemic is over, so we don't need to talk about that anymore. We're going to go back to one of your favorite topics, John. Why don't you share with everybody what we're going to be talking about tonight?
Indeed. Well, our patrons last week on our patron-only show learned sort of a huge piece of the story. So why don't we go to our deck, and now the YouTube audience will hear this a week later. So we'll share, and now everybody knows. So,
well, wait a minute, though. But there's people who are watching now who haven't heard that, who will hear the reveal when it was revealed to me in April of 2019, when
that's right.
Basically acting completely on trust, I flew all the way to Thailand. I got an idea, John. Why don't we show just the first couple seconds of the special doubleheader video that people will get to see later tonight, and then we'll, that way people will know.
Show the first 2 slides of my deck. The first 2 or 3 slides of my deck are the lead up to the first clip. So hold your clip on cue, and let's show them the first 2 or 3 slides, and we'll kind of set this up. So tonight's a special night for patrons, right? So we're going to do a patron-only show where we're going to, get frank and talk about real stuff, because, it seems that what we're allowed to talk about here is somewhat limited.
Who's
But on
Frank?
last Frank,
I
she's
forgot
a
to call
singer.
Frank.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's a singer. I'll tell you about her later. All right, so we've got a big show tonight. So, and it's based on what we were talking about last week with our patrons. So, on last week's show, we talked about what happened in April of 2019. You can go to the next slide. Jason Goodman came to Thailand, and sort of the reason for this had to do with misinformation, disinformation
Right.
that was being spread by other YouTubers. I had come on Jason's show. Jason invited me on his show, and I came on the show. We talked about the Las Vegas shooting, and then I don't know, a couple weeks later, and I forget what the sequence was. We did a show with Paladin, and we did a show with Jake Morphonius. And
Right.
Jake Morphonius comes on the show and gets super aggressive and says that I'm not really in Thailand and all this other stuff. Well, I extend an invitation to Jason privately to come to Thailand.
But wait a minute, you're glossing over something important with Jake. Let's talk about that for a second. People can still see that episode with Jake if they subscribe or just look it up on YouTube. The John Cullen Investigates channel is a co-host channel curated by me. People can watch our live streams on there. And if you go back to the beginning, I have reposted this video with Jake. He wasn't just aggressive, he was deceptive, because he told me when I was setting this up that there was some issue with comments on his YouTube channel. And I said, well, why don't we have a conference call to sort that out so that we all get on the same page? Because Jake, my feeling is you're doing good work, John is doing good work. I'd like you guys to get together and compare notes. And he tried to position it as I set up some kind of Jerry Springer kind of show. The context is important because this video was originally posted in February of 2018 when I was still pretty new to YouTube. People didn't really know who I was or what I was all about. So when an established person on YouTube like Jake starts accusing me of setting up trick shows and accusing you of lying, that can carry a lot of weight with people. And I believe what he was attempting to do was to stamp out our social media presence and any kind of validity, any information we would have offered, to crush it before it was given an opportunity to grow. But now, here we are,
no doubt,
4 years later, and Jake, as far as I can tell, has gone the way of the dodo, maybe the way of the donut, and people watch our show and understand what we're talking about.
Well, he planted the seeds of doubt, right? So the seeds of doubt were planted that I'm a CIA operation and that I'm not really in Thailand. And so those were his words, not mine, right? And I extended an invitation to you privately, and this is what I shared with the patrons last week that the YouTube audience may not be aware of. What I said to you was, I'm leaving Thailand, and I'm only going to be here for a few more weeks. So why don't you come to Thailand, meet my friends, meet, the people that I know here, see where I lived. I'll show you my office, and I'll show you where I did all this stuff. And so Jason takes me up on the offer, but he's so swamped with legal nonsense that he's like, well, I can't get there for 4 weeks. I got legal. I got this thing and that thing. So we had to push it back a couple weeks, but you make the trip, you come to Thailand, and we spent about 4 or 5 days together, basically eliminating misinformation and disinformation.
Absolutely.
In other words, we cut to the chase. Now, it's expensive. What Jason did to fly from New York to Bangkok and then didn't know where he was going next. He didn't know he was going to these pretty beaches.
Most difficult flying day I ever had, because it was New York, LA, maybe New York to Hong Kong and Hong Kong to Bangkok. Was that how it worked?
Yeah,
that's what it was.
Something like that. Or Narita, something like that. It's a long flight. I mean, there's no way around it. It's 24 hours to get there. And Jason didn't know where he was going in Thailand. He didn't know if he was going to Pitsalonic or, Chiang Rai or Chiang Mai, or he didn't know where he was going. So
I didn't know if I was going to Ypsilanti.
Exactly. So you call me from Bangkok. I told you where you're headed. And, lucky you, I've got good taste. So, you get to the pretty beaches, and we got to go see some great stuff. But the point of this is Jason spent his own money, spent thousands of dollars to cut to the essence of what is real information and what is nonsense, right? And it shouldn't be this complicated. There shouldn't be people who are spreading misinformation. I mean, who the hell would say that I'm a CIA operation? I mean, where do you come up with this kind of crap?
Well, by the way, Jake said that he had been in Thailand. I mean, the craziest thing is the guy spoke Thai more fluently than people who I saw there in Thailand, which is pretty unusual. It's a very obscure language. He's like, oh, well, I just spent some time in Thailand when I was working for the State Department and got all caught up in a CIA plot to kidnap a drug dealer. Oh, that sounds totally normal.
Yeah, it was pretty.
John was on
bizarre.
vacation and decided he liked it, so he stayed. It's a little different story.
And after living there 7 years, I still didn't speak Thai as well as Jake.
Right.
So, all right. So the net of this is, and what makes it special for tonight's audience is Jason and I sat down together in Jason's hotel room for, I guess, about an hour and 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the few times where Jason did a multi-camera shoot. Jason shows up with so many cameras and so many wires and so many batteries. It was stunning. And he sets up a what was it, a 4-camera shoot? We did a 4-camera shoot?
Probably, but let's just make sure people understand. This is all iPhone cameras. This was my vision when I created Crowdsource the Truth, was to bridge the gap between independent media, which was basically just a person sitting in front of a laptop with a webcam reading web pages, bridge the gap between that and really big, expensive, network type produced news shows where you have Donald Trump and Pierce Morgan and this whole crew and lights and everything. My idea was the 5-camera shoot in a gym bag, and that's what we did.
That's exactly what you did, and it was amazing. I mean, it was all done with iPhones and iPads and, portable batteries and stuff like that. So why don't we share with the audience like the first minute or two? And this is what we're going to premiere tonight for our patrons after the patron-only show. So that's why Jason said it's going to be like a double header. We're going to do our patron-only show, and then Jason and I will both be premiering this on our patron channels on Subscribestar and Patreon. So why don't we show everybody kind of a quick peek of you and me in a hotel room in, this would be April 3 years ago, April of 2019. And in fact, it was this week. It was this week, April of, so exactly 3 years ago.
Part of the reason why tonight is the perfect night to play it.
Indeed.
We're here, Koh Samui, Thailand.
Indeed. Welcome, Jason. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Welcome to Thailand.
It's good to meet you, man. After all this time you've been covering Vegas, finally your secret location is revealed. Well, of course, by the time people see this, we'll be gone.
That's right.
From the secret location.
That's right.
But, I mean, it was a real mystery for a while. Who you were, where you were, why you were doing all this stuff.
Exactly.
Do we want to talk about that? What brought you to Thailand? Or just briefly go over absolutely talk about all of that. And tonight, after the show, people who are sponsors on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth are going to see the full hour and 20-minute interview. The thing that's also great about this, John, is that for people who just became familiar with you during the pandemic and missed a lot of your coverage of the Vegas shooting, it's essentially a comprehensive overview of essentially all of your research, and it consolidates the hypothesis into a singular show. So for people who've been asking for that, there it is. It's also really good timing because I know you were as disappointed as I was to hear President Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, endorse Joe Lombardo for governor of Nevada. We're going to get into the details of our feelings about that on the sponsor exclusive segment coming up in 15 minutes. And then after our conversation about current events, the Ministry of Truth, Donald Trump endorsing a criminal for governor, then we'll play the April 2019 interview. So it's going to be an awesome doubleheader. People who are having a nightcap right now, mix another drink and get ready for a long evening of John Cullen. What have you got for us in the deck tonight, John?
It seemed like disinformation was the subject of the moment. So it takes us back to last week's show. Last week we were talking about funny, Barack Obama just kind of, I guess he softened the beach a little bit, talking about disinformation at Stanford and how dangerous it was. And we were talking about this last week, and then lo and behold, this week we now have a new Department of Homeland Security in charge of disinformation. So it must really be dangerous if Homeland Security is now involved, right? Because they manage TSA, right? The TSA agents, and obviously they're really good at what they do. So let's go to the next page where we can focus a little bit more on
yes,
Nina Jankowicz, a slim gorilla style handbook, how to be a woman online.
I didn't realize she was a biologist.
Well, if you are confused about how to be a woman online, you can read all about it from Nina Jankowicz. And she seems to have a Ukraine flag, a U.S. flag, and a check mark. So that's tip top, right? That you don't get better than that. If you get those two and the check mark, that means you really care the most, more than anybody else. What can we say about Nina Jankowicz? Well, why don't we go see what Breitbart, what is Breitbart saying about Nina Jankowicz? They've got a story out that's hold on. Okay, let's go live on Breitbart.com and see what they've got. Pop on over there. Because I think they've got a story about her. I'm not sure if it's a positive story or not a positive story, but
I have a feeling maybe no.
So if we go to Breitbart and you scroll down a little bit, call for Facebook to censor Breitbart. Well, that's okay. All right. But scroll down a little bit more. There was another story about her and her singing. And
here we go. Gender misinfo equals threats to democracy. I do think she's nuts. I mean, Mary Poppins, she's singing. Is this her male trolls on TikTok?
Each one of these
is
a unique opportunity.
Should we play this? It contains offensive language, doesn't it?
This is not for children. The show is not for children. This is an adult show. We're talking about the government, and this is somebody that has been selected by the government to be in charge of what is real information. So this is Department of Homeland Security.
You know what? I'm not going to play this because it gives her an opportunity to cancel us. And that's what they're looking to do. All of these people are social engineers, and we're going to get into detail on why we say that, not just call them names. We're going to really point out to people the tactics that are being used. And I mean, I know it's been discussed ad nauseum, but it's really relevant because it seems to people like this just sort of spontaneously came out of nowhere. But we're going to talk a lot about how Twitter has played a role in this for probably going back to 2006. And how people like Jake and other social engineers who have attempted to disrupt this channel, your channel, and other truthful, honest people searching for the truth who just get slammed by this kind of crap.
If all I had to do was sing this song that she's singing here in order to get one of these big jobs and go, what's the title of the song again? It's up in the headline. What's the title of the song? Who do I...
It says,
because if I just have to sing that and I can get a big job in the government, one of these high-paying department, I'll sing that and dance around. We can do that. All right, let's go to the next page of my deck.
Before we move off of this, John,
Yeah.
We really need to
right.
focus on this for a second, because not only
Yeah.
does this demonstrate poor taste on her part and a lack of
Right.
judgment on her part, but the people who put her in this position, the fact that they could not anticipate that this sort of ridiculous material would be brought up right away and would make probably this is one of the most egregious actions ever brought forth by a presidential administration that I'm aware of, in terms of being unconstitutional, anti-American, and nuts. The fact that they didn't know that this particular person leading it would lead to such an immediate backlash shows that every person involved with any aspect of this has no sense of judgment at all.
And they're not using the tools that are available. There's commercially available software and systems from companies like ClearForce that would have pulled this up in 2 seconds and said, no, she's a complete liability. ClearForce, it's called. And
it's its own problem. ClearForce, that's Patrick Berge.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But that's what this is. And there's a half a dozen others like this that are looking at your social media profile. And when you go to get a job and you think you're all set to go work at Amazon Web Services because you're a big shot, and they say, well, there was this tweet back in 2016 that was not really consistent with the company values. That's what this is. And the fact that nobody's using these kind of tools preemptively to identify the liability that someone like that would, it just tells me they don't care. They just don't care. And that's what, what's this, the show The Office from England? Who's the English guy that really made the show?
Ricky Gervais.
Yeah, that's what he was saying when he was hosting whatever it was he was hosting. He's like, they just don't care. He's like, they keep hiring me because they just don't care. It's like they don't realize what I'm saying. They just don't care. So let's go to the next line of my deck. He's great. And that's what I see with our government is they'll select somebody like her without doing the checks because they just don't care. But meanwhile, we do our, from time to time, we do our public safety announcements here. And we have to, this is important. There is still a Homeland Security National Terrorism Advisory alert, right? And it's important that people are aware of, well, if you zoom in on the highlighted stuff, the United States remains in a heightened threat environment fueled by several factors, including an online environment filled with false or misleading narratives and conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
And they call that malinformation, disinformation. Now they call it MDM. So now they've given it a moniker. So now it's
that a
MDM.
Club drug?
It's the classic FBI crap is what they do. Everything's got 3 initials, 4 initials, MDMC and MDMF and MDMG, and we're going to now have all this nonsense. So
isn't that a drug, MDM?
MDMA.
I'm missing a letter. MDMA. Right.
MDMA. Yeah. And that's ecstasy. So so just to know that we're in a heightened state of Homeland Security terror alert because of misinformation and conspiracy theories on the internet. I've been piping up a little bit more on Twitter in the last week or two. Here's a tweet. So here's kind of one of the things I do. Here's Lou Dobbs talking about the FBI and the CIA. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see he didn't get a whole lot of responses to this tweet. So 6, right? So nobody
Doesn't he
replied.
have a lot of followers, Lou Dobbs?
Yeah. So 6 retweets, 5 likes, and I'm like the only one replying to it.
Wow.
And I wrote back to him and said the FBI covered up the Las Vegas shootings' real origins and perpetrators, and put a link to one of the videos that I did, basically calling out Aaron Rouse of the FBI. So love Lou Dobbs, big fan of his. He's one of the original investors in Spacecom. So he's another amateur astronomer. Yeah, Spacecom is Lou Dobbs. He's one of the partners in that. So let's go to our next page. We'll take
people are calling. We're almost out of time here. Oh, she blocked you.
Yeah. No, she blocked Aaron Mate. So Aaron is on one of the email distribution lists from one of my uncles, right? One of our patrons. And Aaron got blocked by her. So she's obviously not terribly tolerant. So that's safe to say. And then we got 1 or 2 more things and we'll jump ahead. to our patron-only hour. This is an event that's coming up, an online event. This should be a lot of fun. I replied to this one. This is another one. So again, these guys are tweeting things out and they don't get a lot of responses. So when I reply to it, my replies should stick out like a sore thumb. And I said that this event should be a riot. Again, they're talking about what's the title of their event here, about misinformation and disinformation and coronavirus. We're going to take questions, and here's a doctor and this doctor and that doctor, and they're going to take questions about COVID. Okay, and it's a live event, May 5th. So at this live event, let's start out with some questions, right? Washington Post, yeah, so sponsored by. Yeah,
Jeff Bezos.
So I replied to them, and I said, this should be a riot. How many people are dead from COVID-19 in China? How many in Beijing? How many in Shanghai? It's very difficult for these people to address sort of the most basic questions. We go to the next slide in the deck, and then we'll jump over to Patreon. I don't know if we even have time for this one, but go one more slide, and we'll wrap up on this.
We're really pushing up on the time, John, and we got a lot.
Yeah,
of
we got to
stuff
jump. We got to jump.
So let's save that. We'll cover that when we begin the sponsor exclusive segment on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. It's going to be a double header for patrons tonight. We're going to have John and I finishing our conversation about this topic of misinformation and disinformation and the absolute destruction of the U.S. Constitution. Then we're going to have an amazing feature for everybody who's a sponsor. You will see the interview that I conducted with John in Thailand, in Koh Samui, Thailand, in April of 2019, our first personal meeting. I didn't even know what John looked like when I went there. So it's going to be exciting for people to see. Make sure you join us, and thanks for tuning in.